Victorian home at 4th and McDonough at a time when it was unfashionable and unbankable for women to buy old homes. She fell in love with the craftsmanship and character of old buildings. She purchased her first building on Main Street from the Urban Renewal Authority in 1974 on the basis of her drawings for preserving the building and restoring it to its former presence. Archie Scott encouraged and abetted the project. At the time, preserving and restoring historic buildings for reuse was not fashionable or bankable. With the help of an interested commercial lending officer and a pioneering appraiser, the building was purchased, restoration financed, and the work done. It was also a pioneering tax credit project in time for America's bicentennial the following year. Prior to concentrating on Main Street in St. Charles, she worked on development in St. Louis's Central West End, Laclede's Landing, and downtown St. Louis. Penny has served on the St. Charles Landmarks Board for 11 years. She's a member of the Board of Directors of Missouri Preservation, is a board member of Historic Downtown St. Charles, board member of Blue Dune Historic Society, Columbia College National Alumni Award for Community Service, HBA Outstanding Preservation Project, Missouri Preservation McReynolds Award for continuing work in preserving historic properties over a long time, Missouri Preservation Archie Scott Award for Preservation in St. Charles, and STC Main Street, she's a board member. Please, welcome Penny Pitman with her wealth of knowledge.
Hi, thank you for coming today. This has been kind of a trip down memory lane. I brought lots of photographs, and hopefully I'll keep the microphone close enough to me. To my surprise, for over 50 years, I've been restoring historic buildings. That would be next year. This is my personal story, because I'm going to be showing photographic records of things that I worked on and that were changed to increase the attraction of Main Street. The first building I restored on Main Street was in 1975. I lived at 4th and McDonough. There was a lot of activity going on in the area. There were a bunch of creative people that had been attracted to the area, but it was kind of Skid Row. There were still people sleeping, street people who stood around barrels with fires in them. There were a lot of moving and storage areas down there. It was a tough area, and I was told that there's some of the homes down there that didn't even have interior plumbing. The state had bought the old historic First Capitol in 1960, and it just sat there for a while, and then it was restored, and I believe in 1969. History was important to the area, and the encouragement that came from the surrounding area, kinds of things that had happened in this area, and the resources that were available were important to being able to restore historic buildings. This is Main Street Historic District. It's 13 blocks long. There are two pieces to it. The original section was South Main Historic District, and you can see where it stopped. North Main was another section. North Main had been, was the downtown commercial districts. South Main had more small residential buildings and a few commercial buildings, but North Main had the larger buildings on it. Among other things, you'll see the reasons why has been such a difference talked about for the two areas. Even now, even though it changed and went back to the way it should be in 1996. The people who worked on the South Main area added to the National Register of Historic Places. The district was later extended to North Main. and tell you something about the area and how it changed between 1973 and 2024. I'm going to see if I can find the pointer and match you up with where some of the things are. This is the old bridge, which is at Adams Street. This is Monroe. Adams is right over here. Monroe is a side street for where Throws is. If you look, this section of buildings, this is Madison right here. This is the old post office. This is the Oddfellows building. You go through this section of things. This whole area that I'm outlining in red right now was changed significantly. These buildings faced Main Street. Everything that faced the river was taken away, was removed. And in most places it ended up being parking. But this is where Riverside Drive was put through. So Riverside Drive is up against the backside of the buildings now, and you can access. You can also see that this piece of the river was willow jungle. And my understanding is that some merchants on Main Street, the Wolves and the Throws and some other people had worked on the idea of having this turned into a park. You can see City Hall didn't exist where it was at that point. It was still in use. This, one of the resources that were available to, if you were working on historic buildings, was some historic precedent for things that went on. There was an unusual mix of stuff in St. Charles because one, we had a photographer who did tons of photographs and documented most of the buildings that were around. The second piece was Rainy Stiglmeyer, who copied things. At this time, it was all pre-digital, so in order to get a copy of the photograph, you had to send it out, get somebody to shoot it again, and get it back. This little symbol is a part of the historic plaques that are on Norfolk in 1851. The other pieces that were available were the Historic Society, and St. Charles is an unusually history-oriented town, and I attribute a lot of it to Edna Nicholson. A lot of people believe that she was inaccurate in some of the writing, but she did write 460 articles for the newspaper and kept history alive and collected, I believe, everything in the world about St. Charles, which was a treasure, and got enough people together to be interested in history. If you look around Main Street, a few years ago, you used to see these big old black and white shielded plaques that said something about the building that was in it. I think those also kind of made people relate to the history of the area and understand how much history we know. The second person I want to talk about is Archie Scott. He is a remarkable guy, was a remarkable guy. Archie was an art director for Channel 2, but he lived on Main Street with his wife and child, and was fascinated with the history of the area, and was sort of almost terrorized the city council, by making them aware of what they were doing that was affecting Main Street particularly. Archie was the founder of SMPS, which is South Main Preservation Society. And there's two organizations because of the split that there was in the area. One was South Main Preservation Society. We used to put on buttons and go to council meetings to object to things. When the mall was put in the mid-70s, the city was going to close South Main also. And South Main Preservation Society hired Andy McCullough, who was an attorney on South Main, to sue the city to keep it open to traffic. the people that were there, the business owners and the property property owners and the merchants didn't want it closed, and were very clear about it. This was a part of there was a lot of money around, because I believe that's when City Hall got built, and also that's when the pedestrian mall was installed. These two groups together gathered people every time an issue came up with the council that would detrimentally affect Main Street to try and change things. We protested against moving City Hall from downtown. We protested against allowing too many liquor establishments on Main Street. We've tried to keep things, tried to even keep the street lights the right color instead of making them blue white, making them yellow white so that they look like they belong in a historic district. Over the years, a number of protections have been needed. It was during this period also that the Landmarks Board was established, that the area was designated a historic district. Just for curiosity's sake, these two organizations still exist, but not nearly as active as they were. Groups still muster people to come to council meetings to discuss whatever's there that needs to have attention. When the city when the city went to change the liquor laws, 50 people showed up to speak. Got passed anyway. I don't know, these are photographs of the pedestrian mall. The pedestrian mall was in two pieces. I'm not sure if you'll recognize some of these buildings, but this is where Novello's is now. That was the Masonic Hall. This is where Jake's Locker is, which is on Main Street. These are ones that, this is Tuners. Tuners are pretty much still the same. This is the 100 South Block, which is the cultural center of the city. This is also where City Hall was, where the archives are now for the area. Here's another shot of the same idea of the kinds of things that have happened to buildings in there. I'm going to show you later this building and what it looks like now, and this building and what it looks like now. This part of the mall was removed in 1996. It was actually two pieces. One piece was in the 100 South Block, and it was removed in 1986 or so. Then, over a period of years, the buildings that were open that had traffic in front of them started being redone. When the mall was removed, the mall area had a 70% vacancy rate. The city had gone for the idea because they were attempting to compete with suburban shopping malls and believed that this would be a good thing for the city, and it didn't work very well. It was kind of an urban panacea for many cities the same size throughout the country. Most of them have been taken out. Property owners got together and agreed to pay for a third of the cost of removing the mall, and that's how we got it done. Over a period of years, I redid 12 buildings. I still own 4, and it's become a vibrant mixed-use area, taking its place again as the center of the community. These are the rehabs that I've done. And as I said, it's over a period of time. The first one was back in the early days. This was in 1975, pre-digital days. This was the Salvation Army building, which is at 416 South Main. It's now the Sweet Shop. And it was vacant at the time. Immediately to the north of this one is where the gazebo park is now, with a little pocket park where everybody goes to have their wedding pictures taken. That was a design by George Worthington, who worked at that time with the city on the urban renewal project, but this one then became, this is the sweet shop now. So if you look backwards, this is what it was.
Wow.
This is what it is now.
Beautiful.
This one, Oddfellows Hall, was my favorite building. I don't own it any longer. I sold it to Randy. He does a very good job of taking care of the building and other things in the area. But if you look, these are old postcards. Where the concert hall is, in this building, the original courthouse for St. Charles was here, which was a wonderful little Jeffersonian building. It was damaged, and this building was destroyed in the 1876 tornado that came down Main Street. This is what happened to it. Here's the old courthouse again. This is the Oddfellows Hall that was built to replace it after the tornado took down the building. This is again the archives building.
How does that change?
When I bought the building in 1983 or 84, it was missing some of the details that had been used by the city as a part of the detectives division. There were this floor, the second floor was Fish, which was a used clothing store that was part of a charitable enterprise. And the third floor was empty. The city had thought that there were structural problems. It turned out there weren't. We replaced the balcony here and the cupola on top. We did it. This whole front is cast iron. It was built in 1878 by the Oddfellows. And I'm going to talk a little bit about them. Many of the important buildings in St. Charles were built by fraternal orders during this period, are owned by fraternal orders. One of the stories that there was about this building in particular was that there was a skeleton hidden inside. Everyone thinks a lot of the buildings are haunted, etc., but the skeleton that was in here comes from Oddfellows ritual. And there are a part of the ritual where the new brethren are hoodwinked, which means blindfolded, marched around, and then exposed to a human skeleton in a coffin to induce reflection upon the briefness of life and the value of things in a worthy life. Once the hall was abandoned, the Oddfellows then may have left the coffin there with its skeleton in the building. I never found it. For the most part, people think there are lots of things in these buildings. I've had good luck in a couple of times. One of the buildings was an old drugstore, and I found the menu from the fountain that was in the place. It was Charles E. Myers drugstore. Again, this is the Oddfellows building. Throughout the years, it was originally, the Oddfellows typically built the tallest building in town. They would move onto a street, and during the 19th and 20th century, they were very important. They were close to the same size as the Masonic lodges. There, also, in this area, there was the Order of the Elks was there. There was a Knights of the Maccabees. Other fraternal orders, the Knights of Pythias. Fraternal orders were a big thing. And this building is still the tallest building on Main Street. And it's called the Queen of Main Street. There's been many things, always been a center of activity. For years, the way it was laid out, there was a bank in front. The second floor was a theater, concert hall kind of thing. The back part of the second floor was an entertainment area with a pool hall and those kind of things. The third floor was the meeting room for the Oddfellows. We had little doors, little trap doors on the doors. We had to knock and get a secret passage to be able to come in. Likewise, the Masons had similar things. It also later was owned by the Moose, who met there for many years. And one of the things I found there was that there was a giant moose inlaid in the linoleum on the third floor. And when we put the cupola back, which is this particular section that was missing, the building was pretty well finished, so we had a giant party. And brought a queen in. This was on the ground. And so we had a big party and balloons. Had a crane and lifted the cupola onto the top. And at the time, Mel Wetter was mayor. And B. Wetter drew a picture of Missouri River water on the cupola before it was raised. At that same gathering, a number of people came up and talked about how they learned to dance on the second floor and some other things. Just that this place meant something to many people. Next building was 104 South Main. It again was fairly intact. This was probably a 1924 picture. Again, it came from the archives and it came from one of the Rudolph Goebel photographs. The cornice on this one is 10. The exterior wasn't in bad shape. It just needed attention, lots of attention. The interior needed new systems, and all kinds of things. But the exterior was, as I said, fairly intact.
Can you tip the mic a little bit square to your mouth, maybe?
Okay, is that better? I'll try. My voice doesn't go very far. As I said, I don't have a teacher's voice. So.
That's good.
Actually, that's very good.
Is that better?
That's much better.
This building is on at least the second one on this site. The original building was probably built about 1847. It was remodeled in 1880. Originally, the reason why I know some of this is because there are hand-hewn beams in the basement that they pulled from the old building and put into this one, or used the same foundation. This building is 3 stories in the front and 2 stories on the back. That balcony that you see is probably got one of the best views in town. There are apartments up above. Down below is retail. And there's a lower level that is classic on Main Street, which is a walkout. You walk up about 5 steps, and you're on the ground. It's kind of called an English half basement when you see windows that are open to the light. The next building was this one, which is also on the 100 block. This is the Platt's grocery store. This one was an unusual building, and I have to check with Randy because he now owns it. I redid this building. This is what it looked like. They had taken this building and put a new storefront in it, put an aluminum and glass storefront in it, and clad the exterior with another layer of brick. If you look here, you'll see that at one time it looks like there was probably a balcony there because there's a door that walked out on it. See this opening right here? This steel was probably put in the 40s or 50s when it was modernized. But it was then redone. These are the guys getting rid of the trash and stuff and getting rid of the extra brick layer that's on the front of it. And that's what it looked like now. It's a really classic storefront building, not terribly large, but a nice building, and now it contributes to the 100 block again. This is one that was on the far end of the mall, 319 North Main. I love this picture just because we talk a lot about signage and things and try to limit the kind of signage people do. But this obviously was a paint and wallpaper store. You couldn't miss it. When I bought the building, It's on the west side of the street. Much of the stuff was missing, but see the oriel window at the very top? Let's see. This little round window? It's still very evident, and this dental work on here is very evident. But it didn't look like this. It looked like this. And I don't know if anybody is old enough to remember, but the building next door had a fiberglass, corrugated fiberglass front on it. This is a piece of the mall structure that was there. This black band across here said Snyder's Vogue. And it was a clothing store. That covered up this set of windows that were in the storefront. Again, it was a classic storefront. A lot of open space downstairs and smaller space up above. But there's the oriel window again, which was uncovered and redone. Then this one had some problems in the floor because the drainage that it was downhill from, and a lot of the floor joists had rotted out. But again, this is a piece of the mall structure that was there. It then became an antique store and looked like this when I completed it. It has a completely different color scheme now, but it's still functioning as a going building with a business in the first floor. This building didn't look like this when I got it, but this is an early picture of what people had done thinking that they were making it look historic. It was a bar. This is back when it was originally built, and this was a classic little building that was John Schultz plumbing supply, and featuring a tub, a sink, and a toilet in the front window. And it was built as a sanitary building. It's a little building, but along this, the pilasters on either side are glazed green brick, and then everything was done in white tile. Here's what it looked like when it was done. One of the features of the building when I bought it was that Tony Communion was bottling wine in the basement. He owned the building. And the first floor was a used clothing store again, a thrift store. Tony later went on to leave St. Charles and go to Augusta and started Augusta Winery. And he owns a couple of wineries there. There have been some very high energy, creative people involved in Main Street over the years, luckily. This building, the illustration on the upper left, comes from the 1875 Atlas of St. Charles County. It was built in 1868. And this is what it looked like. And again, I will point out a couple of things that are different. People may remember this as Schilling's department store. Before that, it was Dave Wheel's Palace clothing store. And he then built a building across the street, which is now Q. And this was a Masonic lodge from the 1920s on. And the Masonic lodge, when they moved in, decided, I believe, I'm making a lot of this up, but I believe they had board members, because the cornice is about 6 feet higher now than it was at this point. They reframed the entire building with steel and then made the third floor, this one, clear span, no divisions in it at all, so that they could have their Masonic lodge meetings there in proper form. The second floor was a place where people came for chili suppers run by the Masonic lodge. There were also a dentist's office, optometrist's office. I believe somebody lived back there. Downstairs was Huning's department store. The shoe department was in the lower level. Huning's was still there. When I bought the building, they moved down the street after about a year or so. And the building was completely redone. It needed all new systems. This was a paint job. It was the size of the building. It's a large building. And it actually started out as two buildings. This piece was originally built in 1845, but when they built this piece, they put the two together. Or possibly the Masonic Lodge did. That's what it looked like before and after. The building is now occupied by a restaurant on the first floor. If you can believe it, now we have a restaurant taking the same place that an entire department store took before. If you look, see how high the cornice is here? See how much space there is above it? That's the extra 6 feet or so that was added, I believe, to the top of the building. The Masons sold the building, the lodge owned the building, and they sold it and moved to a place, I believe, to get more parking, and a place on 1 story instead of 3 stories. This is what it looks like now. We added the balcony bar. Main Street historically has been a kind of a street of balconies. I've seen several photographs that are looking down the street that show balconies on just about every building, whether it was a full balcony like this or what we call a parade balcony. This was 213 North Main, which at one time was Hucker's Bakery, and another point was Charles E. Meyer Drugstore. It was unoccupied when I bought it. This is what it looked like. And if you look at the balcony, that's the detail that we found to be able to use to restore the balcony back to this building. For a number of years, it was occupied by an accounting firm. There's several apartments in the top of the building. This is 215 North Main, which is next to it. And at some point, the two buildings, that one and what is now Sabre, in the building next door, were joined together. They chopped a hole through the wall. The hole was closed up again, but the storefront was replaced and restored back to what it used to look like. This was, if you remember, I talked about the tornado coming down Main Street in 1876. This was a 3-story building. If you look at it, Henry Denker was one of the movers and shaker people, and this was his grocery store. Initially, I didn't recognize it as the same building because in 1876, I believe, the tornado came and took part of the 3rd floor off. So there is a half of a 3rd floor in this building. And they rebuilt it, and there's a brick wall down this side too, and this was a storefront getting taken out and redone. And it was redone in 1998, and in 2023 we put this cornice on to replace the other cornice that was not as historically appropriate as this was. This is quite a close match to what was there originally. This is a bank building that was on 121 North Main Street. This is where First State Bank was at one point. They, at some point, I believe in the 60s, 1960s, they decided to redo it and modernize it, and they added on a section to the side, this piece, and they took that wonderful Rose Arts building and clad it all in red granite, high polished red granite, and added on this section and took out this corner of the old building. This is the hardest exterior that I worked on because the original building was limestone. Let me go back one. When you look at what had happened, when we took the granite off, the upper cornice was missing. The keystones had taken hammers and knocked them down. There were pilasters along here that you could see in the old building. So they had spent a lot of money redoing this to make it look like it belonged in the 1960s or 70s. Luckily, there are enough craftsmen left in the area that we could rebuild a lot of this, because we ended up rebuilding the stone. The pieces that were missing, you can kind of see it. This entire section was gone, and a good part of this section was gone. That's a fiberglass cornice. It looks like a stone one again, but it's fiberglass. And this is the remake of 123 North Main. It's occupied now by an environmental services company. This is the last building I worked on, which is 136 South Main, which in its history was many things, but let me see if I can come up and dig it. In 1883, there was a hog slaughtering building behind it. This was a drugstore, a grocery store, and the post office. And upstairs, it was called the Cosmos Building, which makes me think there's no place that I could find in it that could had room to put big presses that were heavy. So it must have been like the editorial part was up here, because at one point, the Cosmos Monitor was published out of the back of the 117 South Main across the way. This was what it looked like. And this had been turned into a restaurant for a while. The building had a lot of structural problems. And that cornice up there is pressed tin that was coated with zinc, as are the pieces above the windows. This is a glorious building. It has huge windows in it, and the second floor was largely all wide open. This is what the back addition looked like. Well, look carefully. See these props? 2x4s. This building was a locker. You know, the whole building was known as St. Charles Locker, I think. And it was operated, it was a place where you bought a quarter of beef and put it in a freezer. And the freezers were in here and in the front building. And when they put the freezers in, they chopped a hole in the front building wall. And when they took the freezers out, the back wall started to go. And this is, again, a glorious building. I'm so glad we didn't use it along the way. But this back building had enough problems that it came down. It had a cracked foundation, among other things. And it was replaced with a replacement building roughly the same size. This, again, gives you an idea of what the interior looked like. These are the props, again, that were holding up the back wall. This was the interior. In some places, I was told that the way the butchers cleaned up in the evening, when they were cleaning up, they would sluice the floor down and squeegee it off to the edges, and which would rot off the end of the floor joists, where they were pocketed into the walls. So there was no first floor in this part, and that's the inside of the other part, the back section. This was the electrical system for the building. It was, like I said, a lovely old building in many ways, but it had some real, it had been treated very badly over the years. And that's what it looks like now. And it's occupied. The upstairs are offices in here, and the first floor is a retail space. It's been, even since I've owned it, it's been many things. It's been a beauty shop, massage place there was in there, a bathhouse was in there that sold handmade soaps. Jake's Locker, which is a Life is Good shop, is now expanded to fill both sides of the first floor. What we're working and talking about, and one of the reasons I wanted to show where we've been, and I wish that I had more photos of other places, but largely The only ones I had documented were ones that I worked on. We've been trying to emphasize that Main Street is an authentic, balanced community that attracts entrepreneurs of energy. We have lots of startup businesses, lots of people who are beginning either small retail businesses or other things, and I've had people in retail and in other kinds of businesses grow and buy their own buildings, or grow and get so big that they couldn't stay. But people like to work and live on Main Street. One of the things that some of the entrepreneurs, including some tech-heavy people, have discovered is that it's easier to hire people to come down and work on Main Street just because it's a nice community and it feels comfortable for folks. And it is an interesting architecture that makes people feel like they belong there. It's a signature area for St. Charles. And life goes on. This is not one that I did. This is just finished last year. You remember Jean's Shoes building?
Mm-hmm.
This was Jean's Shoes. Before Jean's, it had been a JCPenney store.
Mm-hmm.
It had been an implement store, and I believe a car dealership. Tom Smith redid it and did a beautiful job on the exterior. It's now the Soda Museum, and downstairs is an arcade, so there's something for kids to do. That was just recently completed. It was a big project, and he did a beautiful job doing it. Next one is a Randy Schilling project, and it's just now finished this year. This is what it looked like before. That was Frankie Toko's.
Yes.
And the Tokos decided to retire, and they sold the building, and now it looks like this, and it's become Frontier Perk Coffee Shop Cafe. Like I said, just opened shortly. Pretty soon, every building that's on the 100 block of South Main will have been redone. But the goal is to, those organizations that helped so much along the way, and those people, Donna Hopper's here today, and she was a big part of the issue at the time, very actively doing things, and there are many people who are now passed who made it possible for Main Street to look and feel like it does, and fought very hard to keep it into a context that was not just one thing, but a mixture of stuff. So those two organizations have become less involved, and a new organization has been formed, St. Charles Main Street Foundation, which is a not-for-profit that we put together about 5 years ago to try and keep Main Street going for the next 50 years and improving over the period of time. The organizations that I mentioned before have contributed so much to the way this works and the street acts that it's become important, again, to be a part of a Main Street program. It's a national program that extends for the next 50 years. Thank you.
We're going to do questions at the end for both Penny and Randy. While Randy gets that up, I just want to say, Randy Schilling is a native of St. Charles, attended Emmanuel Lutheran, St. Charles High, went to the University of Missouri at Columbia, married into the Breuer family, for those of us that have written about the three Theodores. In 1992, he bought the Quillegee building, which was his first foray into Main Street. Married, has 4 kids, and he now has opened 10 pieces of property on 100 South Main. And if I
So I'll try to focus. So some of my slides are going to be redundant, so I'll skip over a little bit of that, and try to focus on moving forward a little bit, some of the things that are going on, and tell a couple stories that will tie in, because my history at Penny goes back quite a ways. So I think, Penny, you said you started down on Main Street in 1975.
75,
74, 75?
75.
75. So 1975, I was 12. I was at school up the street. Everybody says, Randy, what are you doing with these tech companies down on Main Street? I say, well, I went to grade school a couple blocks up the street, and my in-laws are a few blocks that way. And so I met my wife that year, in 1975, at Emmanuel. So Sibby and Lily Brewer, their mother, sent them to Emmanuel, which was my grade school. I had 3 brothers, and we all went to school there. And so that's why I met Sibby. They came marching in the class, we all went, they came in, and she came in, it was our sixth grade. And that's where I first met my wife, which we dated through high school up to our junior year, and then she went off to William Jewell in Kansas City. I went to University of Missouri to be an engineer, and after school, we started dating about 4 years after school, and I moved back to St. Charles, and that was the history. But that was important because when I first decided to be on Main Street, it was because I was starting my first business in 1992. My father-in-law, Charlie Brewer, and so he's technically T. Charles Brewer IV, the first built, he was an Oddfellows and built First State Bank. That was that 1878, the Oddfellows building. So it came back in the family. I bought the building from Penny in 1998. And I didn't even know that story at the time, that was, so it's kind of an interesting history of the whole thing. And my father-in-law was a big emphasis for, he said, Randy, I was going, hey, I'm trying to say I want to start my own business. Sibby and I just bought our first house on Sibley and Anderson Street. It's a little house, and my wife was pregnant with our first child, Rhea, at the time. And I had a little bit of money saved up, and I said, Charlie, I have this idea, I want to do this tech business. He sent me down to that building. Dick Sachs was running space for Penny. He was a small business consultant. He's still around. And so I went down to the building, and Dick pulled out Yellow Pages, a big old thick at the time. It was pre-internet. And he said, Randy, why do you want to be in the software consulting business? Look at all these consultants. And I said, well, I was set on doing it. He was kind of playing devil's advocate, and Charlie sent me down there. But that was Penny's building. And I came down the stairs, and there was a for lease sign, I think, on the door of a little suite of the Oddfellows building. And I came back to talk to Penny. Penny, I don't even think you charged me rent for the first store. If it wasn't much. And she helped me as I was starting my first business, which then, we grew that business to 540, 50 employees. And I needed a headquarters for that building, for that business, and that's how I ended up buying the building from Penny in 1998. So that was 26 years ago or whatever. So anyway, and she instilled in me the whole concept of preservation, the historical architecture, and the importance of building the Main Street community, and that and still influences a lot of what decisions that we make every day. So anyway, let's talk a little bit about some of the projects that, so these are the 10 properties that our family has bought and owned, still own on Main Street today. We do have a pocket park, but starting with 108, that's the building, Penny, that's the old Toquist building. We just finished that one. We bought it a year ago, and it's now Frontier Perk. 112 is Jujubee's. 116, Penny actually had a hand in initially rehabbing that building. It's MJ's clothing store. 117 South Main, that's Oddfellows building. So we recently have converted put back retail, and that's important to keep that street vibrant. I used to use it for office, but as we sold some of those business, we've converted that to retail. And then the old post office, which was a wonderful project. And then 122 and 124. The 122 is the old Masonic Hall, which then was the Elks. And then 124, which I don't think, I have pictures of that, and I'll show that. And then the building behind the Historical Society, which is on Jefferson Street, and then the Madison Street Pocket Park, and then the parking lot up on Second. So anyway, I'll show you a picture of what the before and after. So the picture up top, I actually went into the office this morning. This was from a photograph that one of my employees took at the time. So these are the 5 buildings on the east side of Main Street that we own. So this is the Toco 108, this is 112, 116, 122, and 124. And that's before we rehabbed them. And I think Penny had already done 116 at the time. That was the only one. So here's where they were. This is actually this morning, so I went and took this morning. So every scene, so it's so neat because I walked down there now, and they're like pulling me into the restaurant because, you know, they're so proud of the rehab of the building. The restaurant is, you know, they had a book signing in there. A guy gave me a book, signed it, so I have it with me, and he wrote a story about Frontier Perk. Here's Jujubee's, women's clothing, MJ's women's clothing. This is part of OPO Startup, so it's office space still. This is Pistol and Vixen, so a mother and daughter who had a shop out in Lake St. Louis opened a second location here. And so those are the 5 that we have on that side. So all of the properties that we own are on the 100 block of South Main. So it's just been a real joy to see the street evolve, because a lot of these buildings, when we purchased them, you know, the Elks building here, or the Masonic Hall, and 126, they were vacant when we bought them. A lot of the stuff was boarded up. The second floors weren't being used. The 112 building was another one. And I have to give you know, Penny did a lot of the work, and she acted as general contractor, a lot of her projects. My projects, I was busy building tech businesses, and so I had hired Jim Drosty. So Jim and now his sons Nate and Jeff really are the ones that did all the heavy lifting. Now, we would, you know, as you do these projects, you saw from Penny's pictures, you have to do them in piecemeal. You pull them back, you see what's there. And Jim was such a wonderful partner and working with me. We'd have so much fun tearing things apart. And it was a good distraction for me to spend time with him as we would try to figure out how to rehab these old buildings. And Penny, she did all herself, where I hired Jim to help me out. And that's how that got taken care of. So a lot of fun. So the other, you already saw this from Penny. So that's Frontier Perk Cafe, which is open 2 weeks ago. Wonderful place to go eat. So if you like breakfast and lunch, have a wonderful, and that's, you gotta get there early, because you'd be waiting today, you'd wait in line to get in there. One of the wonderful projects was the old post office. So I had started Quillogy in 1992. That was the first company we did, and I had that for almost 20 years. And my office was on the top floor of the Oddfellows building. I'd always look down onto this building, and Roy Cox bought this in 1963 or 64. From when it was the post office, when it moved up on the 5th Street. And I'd always look down on this building. Every time it would rain, the roof was a lake. And it has these beautiful white gutters. And I always worried about it. And so anyway, when Roy had it, I would always go over to him. We were in the software business. We were trying to build a data center. And so I thought, well, that old government building, that might be a good data center back in this was the late 90s, early 2000. And I thought we'd try to, you know, put the basement, I could fill it with servers for computing, and that would be our data center. Well, that never worked out. Roy, we talked back and forth, and he just wasn't ready to sell, and it was just a lot of work for him to move. And once he passed, his family approached me. But that, unfortunately, that was after I had sold Quillogy. We sold that in 2010, and I'm like, what am I going to do with this building? I don't have any. But it was such a wonderful structural building that, you know, I talked to several folks, and we thought, well, we'll turn it into a tech incubator. And so the concept was, at the time, this was in 2013, we bought it on Halloween of 13. That's the day we actually closed on it. And it was kind of a thing that was starting to happen around the country. was these incubators to try to encourage entrepreneurs to start tech companies. So I visited the one downtown St. Louis, T-Rex. I went out to Chicago. 1871 is a famous tech incubator in downtown Chicago. And we thought, well, we wanted to do something like that in St. Charles, because when I had Quillogy, we would have people from all around the country coming into Main Street, and they all knew of this historic district and this tech company that was teaching people about Microsoft's new technology, Oracle, and so forth. And so people were kind of trained to come down there. How could we continue that on? And so today we house at the old post office and the other surrounding 8 buildings on the second floor where we don't have retail are about half of them are tech startups and other small businesses. So there's 85 businesses down there right now. So it's a pretty vibrant, and that helps feed the restaurants and the retail during the week when things are a little bit slower. And then on the weekend, they bring their families down. And so it really added to the community aspect of the street, which has been wonderful. But what a draw, Steve. I mean, just a gorgeous building now when you look up. You know, we put the hill back. I don't know how many dump loads of dirt we poured on it to put that lawn back. And then just the whole building is just a wonderful. It's a joy to go to every day and sit in there and work. It's a lot of fun. The other ones, I don't know if you had this picture here. I had another picture, but if you remember, this is the 126 building. Originally it was an apothecary building, and next to the, I guess you call this the Elks building. Before that was a Masonic hall. But a call center was in there, and it was all chopped up, and you had multiple layers of ceilings, and the buildings were connected. So we disconnected the buildings and back and made them 2 separate entities. And it's been, you know, and then based off the old photographs, we reconstructed the front of that building and put it back to the old storefront. And it's been a vibrant retail space ever since. So as Penny said, so we've had these 2, South Main Preservation, and you had Historic Downtown, and there was a period of time around COVID, maybe even a little bit before COVID, Main Street was getting a little bit rough on the north end of the street. We started having a lot of nightclubs start showing up. We had a shooting down there. The city was trying to move City Hall, the Fountain Lakes. So that kind of got us thinking we need a little bit stronger foundation to kind of help guide the city or to guide the street for the next 50 years. And so at the time I was chairing the Special Business District, which there's a little property tax that we all pay on the street as part of the city. And Sue was on that at the time, was on that with us, and we heard about this program. It's a national program called Main Street America. And so there's 1,200 main streets around the country that are part of this program, and there's training and so forth. I don't know how many are familiar with this, but it's a wonderful program. And so instead of reinventing the wheel, we thought we would adopt this Main Street America program, and that's put in place. That's what started the initial work when Penny and I were talking about this and put together our Main Street Foundation to administer this program. And so that was done. This is the current board of the Main Street Foundation. So it's called St. Charles Main Street Foundation. It's a 501c3. So it's a mix of property owners and businesses. So they're stakeholders for the street. And it's based, again, off Main Street America. And there are 4 pillars to this organization. So these are the 4 committees. You have economic vitality, design, promotion, and organization. So economic vitality, you have vacant spaces, you have, you know, hey, we need a new coffee shop, a bakery, a cheese shop. What are we missing on the street? And so this is all about attracting new entrepreneurs, new talent, both on retail or restaurants and retail to the street. And then you have the design piece of that, which is the architecture piece of it. It's the visual, the color schemes, it's the trash cans, it's the, you know, how do you make this thing attractive to visitors and make it all look put together. And then promotion are for our events and things that we're doing to promote Main Street, as well as promoting the businesses down there. And then the last thing is the organization. That's our board and volunteers. So that's the program from Main Street America that we're following. So we went through a 2-year period of getting trained from the national organization. And then last year we finished that. And at the end of that process, they worked with us to establish 2 strategies for going forward. And these are the 2 strategies that we've adopted. The first one is visitor experience. So how can we make our Main Street, what are those things that we can do to make it more attractive to visitors? Because we're very visitor driven and it drives a lot of the revenue for the shops and restaurants down there. And then the second thing was, how do we grow more entrepreneurs? We have a turnover as people age out or maybe sell their shops. Where's those next retailers and restaurateurs and people that we're going to bring to the street? And so those are the 2 strategies we're working on. So we have several initiatives for both of these that we're continuing to work on and develop to keep the street vibrant for the next 50 years. So that's a big part of that. So we do a variety of events. As I said, when we first set up the organization, Penny and I did this thing called One Main. It's evolved into an awards program. So every spring we pull together the property owners and the business owners and stakeholders and do a kickoff to spring, if you would. And then this year, behind the old state capitol, we're starting what's called a supper club. And so that's a fundraiser for the foundation to promote. We have all the food is being serviced by the restaurants on the street, and it should be a wonderful event. So we're doing that September the 12th. It's a Thursday night, and it'll be behind the old Capitol outside. So it's going to be a wonderful event. That's our website, it's stcmaine.org, and I'm going to cut it off there and let you guys ask questions of Penny and I if anybody has any questions. Does anybody have anything?
Back there.
Yeah, go ahead.
I want to ask about the old Elk building and the facade of that. It's really unique on Main Street because it has like marble.
Yes, yeah.
I just think that's beautiful. Is it as pretty inside as it is outside?
Yes, we've talked about doing tours and we'd be happy to do that. But that facade was put on around 1900 when the post office was built. So it originally was a brick facade with glass. I think it was the Masonic Hall and then a saddle shop on the first floor. That saddle shop jumped around on a couple of those different buildings there.
Yeah.
But that facade, which has a terracotta facade on it, was put in, and I have the blueprints of that. It's hanging. I have it framed in a picture. I've got to figure out where I put that. But it's hanging. So we have the actual blueprints, and they're dated. It's around 1908 or 1909 that they put that terracotta facade on the building. Yeah, and that's when it converted from being a Masonic to, I don't know the history of by the Masons, then went to the Elks, and then...
The Masons were there before the Elks, and the Elks put that terracotta.
Yeah, the Elks put the terracotta facade on around 1900, yes.
I'll tell you something, I'm 83 years old.
Yes.
And I took
Wait, hold on. Go.
Oh, here,
Over to Sarah, please. Hold on.
You don't want to...
Okay.
When I was 7, I took dancing lessons at the Oak Club. And to this day, I still have my costume. And I can make it to the toddlers.
So you were dancing in the Elks building there,
When I was
huh?
7 years
Oh, wow.
old.
Which floor? Of the top floor?
I guess you know, it must have been on the
Second? Because the third floor, because we restored it, it's the original floor and ceiling. It has the tongue groove ceiling in it. So we restored all that and took out all, it was all drop ceilings and stuff. And so yeah, you should come visit. We'll take you, give you a tour of that.
Well, Peggy Bennettee, I think, was my teacher when I was 7 years old.
7 years old. Wow.
But I still have that costume.
That's wonderful. Yeah. Yes.
I have a two-part question. First part, this is a wonderful adventure. Okay, it is a wonderful adventure and a dream. How is the support from, how shall we say, City Hall?
So the question was, how's the support from City Hall? So if you follow the city council meeting stuff, and you know, I became very vocal. So I've been down there since '92, Penny way before me. And early on, I'm trying to build my Quillogy. Then we did another company called BoardPack with software on board meetings. Now I'm doing a product called MuniBit. So we're in the software business. But I have heritage, or more. My wife. My father's from southeast Missouri, so he grew up in Perry, we call it East Perry County. So Altenburg, Frohna, Wittenberg, old German community. And my mother's from northwestern Arkansas. But my wife's family, now they're St. Charles true and true. I mean, that goes back. And so I adopted and had taken very personal to what was going on with Main Street. I mean, well, not just me, Penny, others. I still own 10 buildings or a piece of property on South Main. And it's a lot of money, but we put in it. It's significant. And we didn't do it, it's not a moneymaker for us. I mean, we make our money on software. But it was a passion to give back to the community. And we have 4 children, and we want to pass it on to them. I have 2 of my children working with me now. One of them, my daughter, works for a company we sold, and our son just graduated. He's an architect. So I'm very passionate about it. So when the street was turning, we had a shooting down on Main Street. We had nightclub problems going on. I became very vocal about it. And I had pushback from the current politicians in there. And so and people know, I was very vocal about it. But we kind of patched things up. We support, they were wanting to move City Hall away from Main Street, and a lot of us felt that would be very detrimental to the street, to keep it vibrant. It's just symbolic, but also the people interacting with the city. We want to bring them down to the core. We have a very unique Main Street, and when I go around the country meeting and so Penny and I are both part of Main Street America. I'm going this week up to Kansas City. It's the statewide convention for Main Streets. They all talk about St. Charles, and then when they talk about St. Charles, they're talking about Main Street. And so that's, to me, when I started businesses, how are you first, best, or different? What's our differentiator? And our community, that Main Street and the architecture, and part of the Main Street program, it's not just about the 4 things I showed you up there, but at the core of that Main Street program is historic preservation. Mm-hmm. And so what do we need to do to protect that? And so when you get new politicians, they don't always feel that way. A lot of times they're thinking about growth and so forth. You can still do growth and preserve your historic Main Street if you do it in a responsible way. But you can't have certain nightclub type things pop up. What's that going to do to the rest of the businesses on the street? There are 250 plus other businesses. Well, that puts them at a disadvantage. And so, a lot of people have been working on the Main Street program down there way before me. And I always felt that we should respect that and support their efforts. I don't want to see that wiped out. We want to keep building on it because it doesn't happen overnight. You can go back, like Penny said, she started in '75. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's taken a long time to get it. It just didn't happen overnight. And it's taken a lot of not just money, but people's time, energy, and their talents to make it happen. And Penny and Charlotte and Archie Scott and Sue was part of a lot of that too. There are so many people that contribute to that. And so it's gotten better, I would say, but we still have work to do.
Good. Second part of that question.
I'm sorry.
Does this also include Frenchtown?
Our Main Street program doesn't include Frenchtown right now. It doesn't mean that it couldn't, but it doesn't. The city is driving a lot of that right now on Frenchtown. And our Main Street program is strictly for the 13 blocks that Penny showed on her slide.
Okay.
But you could do a separate one for, could do that, or we could add to that at some point. I could see that potentially.
Thank you.
Yep.
What do you feel about the mayor's idea of extending Main Street down through the Foundry all the way to Tecumseh?
So the question was about the ACF property, and so Jim Unger has owned that property for quite a while now. I don't know.
1986.
1986.
Or thereabouts.
And, Penny, I always have talked, a lot of us has talked, I mean, that's a wonderful opportunity if it can be restored properly. Having the street go through there, keeping City Hall downtown was very important to a lot of us, and I supported the new, $85 million now. I mean, we don't have say in how, I'm actually on the committee, but I mean, we're not having a whole lot of input. We will hopefully at some point. But I think keeping that city hall down there was really important. And if you need a new city hall, and if you can do that's we felt that was a good use for that space. And I think connecting the streets together, I think, would be a very positive thing if done right, and keeping in, and there's a lot of historic property in that space too. And if you can keep, and from what we can tell, the look and feel of it's going to be the same. I think it could be a huge boost to the community and will help accelerate some of the development, especially on North Main, where it's kind of on the farther north end of the street, it's kind of lagging a little bit. I think it'll help it. I mean, that's a big invest. It's not just the money the city's putting in, it's also Jim Unger apparently is going to be a co-developer of that, and he's going to have another developer in there. So the city hall piece is only 2 or 3 of those buildings. I'm not sure if it's 2 or 3, but the rest of that property, in addition to what the city's putting in, there'll have to be quite a bit of additional investment put in there, and that'll make a big impact down there.
Yeah.
Other questions?
Keep talking about architecture. The new architecture picture I've seen is glass. How is that fitting on Main Street?
So I guess the question was about the glass architecture of the new city hall. My understanding, and I don't know the answer to this totally, but when you do a government building, you got to worry about continuity. So earthquakes, natural disasters. So there's certain requirements that you're not going to be able to do a government building in a historic structure. So my understanding is they're trying to keep, maybe some of the wall structures, and then we haven't seen the actual plans. If you go to the city's website, there's a video, and hopefully in the next week or 2, you'll start to see some plans. I mean, there hasn't been a whole lot of discussion on that because we just haven't seen anything other than a conceptual video at this point. But the city, they're working on it right now. But, we definitely want to try to keep the character. That's those historic buildings down there it's pretty special space. So, Penny, I don't know if you have anything you want to add to that.
Well, I think there are a couple of concepts here at work too. One of which is, if you look at we call it the Flash Cube City Hall that was built, there was a lot of protest about it, but it also became kind of an iconic part of St. Charles, the Gold Flash Cube building. One of the things that is important, particularly with historic preservation, is to not allow people to do fake buildings to replace real buildings. I'm suspecting that we're going to end up with a glass building of some kind or other for City Hall, and there is a value in having a contrast between new and old, and not trying to make new things look old in a fake way. So I'm guessing my reaction is, because of the way the administration loves big glass buildings, that we probably will end up with a large glass building that's kind of part of the contrast with the brick buildings that are there. The buildings, there are 660,000 square feet of buildings in ACF. It's 17 acres, which is an unbelievable opportunity to do an amazing set of things for classic St. Charles, which is riverfront city. So we kind of wait and see what happens. I don't know, so far the committee that was put in place to help get the bond issue encouraged is being assigned to something aside from working on City Hall. So I don't know where that stands.
Yeah, so I'm one of the members on that committee, and so we've had 2 meetings, and so we met on Monday. Haven't seen any plans yet. We're also now tasked with a new comprehensive plan for the city, so it's kind of a dual. There's good people on there. I mean, I have high hopes that it'll be done in a way that will fit in, and there's a lot of people with eyes on it. Hopefully, it'll go in a way that's going to fit in with the historic nature of the community.
Were there any other questions? I guess not.
All right, thank you all so much. It's really a joy to people that have given back to the community and we just have a gem up a street, so thank you for supporting it.
Thank you. And when I was telling people about the talk today, I got comments like, when I was little, my mom wouldn't drive down Main Street, right? Because it was so bad, dilapidated. And
Skid Row.
a Skid Row, right? And look how far we've come. It's wonderful with the foresight of so many people to have what we have today. And I think that's why I believe our Historical Society is very successful, because we have people who believe in that. And they love the history and they want to continue the history. So we appreciate any support and all the support you give us. Yes?
Oh, let's go try Main Street is actually bricks.
Hold on.
Main Street was really bricks at one time. Then it put blacktop over it.
Yeah, bricks to blacktop, back to bricks again. So, well, do we have a motion to adjourn? Okay, I think Judy was first and Dave was second. All right, well, thank you so much for coming today. We hope you enjoyed the presentation and your lunch.